apologies if I'm talking particularly fast today. I'm very excited, and there's also construction going on next door, so I'm recording with all my windows shut, but it's 30 degrees outside and we Brits haven't discovered air conditioning yet. So I need to make sure I finish this recording before my room turns me into a cupcake. Thank you. Hey people, how are you all? Hope you're well. Happy Pride! I cannot believe it's June already. It's kind of terrifying, but also pretty cool. I've historically done a bunch of OC drawings during Pride in previous years, but I'm not entirely sure whether that's going to happen or not this year, because I have been swamped by far too many fan art ideas, courtesy of a particular show that's airing its second season this summer. And obviously that's what we're here talking about today. You've read the video title. If you came to this video expecting me to actually talk about the art process, then you're probably in the wrong place, because we do not have time for that today. There's so much to discuss. As in previous theory videos of mine, I'm going to start with a small little disclaimer. Obviously, I had nothing to do with the making of the show. I only know what's been shown through posters, Comic-Con panels, behind-the-scenes photos from the last year or two, and of course the things that are in the fabulous trailer, teaser trailer, and intro sequence we have. In other words, all stuff that is readily available for anyone to find on the internet. There has supposedly also been a leak of some kind in the last few days, but I haven't seen it yet, and I'm planning to try avoid any unofficial spoilers if I can, so I don't intend to see that, so if there's something that obviously is wrong in here because I've not seen that, that will be why. Furthermore, this video is entirely for fun and mostly for my own amusement, so I can rant about the show without driving my friends and family up the wall. All my theories are, of course, just that, theories, and as we go through I'll probably mention on and off how likely I think various things are. There's a couple places where I've kind of proposed two alternate theories of what I think might happen, so don't expect it all to be incredibly accurate. The closest I actually have to any media analysis knowledge is half an animation degree, and my own observations for watching way too much TV. In other words, don't take me too seriously and just try and enjoy the video. So I did actually think about making a theory video like this for this show a while back, when I made my Our Flag Means Death theory video. But I kept putting it off because they were being really stingy on the details, which, fair dues, they've worked really hard on this and they obviously want it to be a surprise. And there are so few loose ends from the end of season 1 other than the general idea that heaven and hell are still mad at each other. So I wasn't really sure what I could talk about, or what direction the show would even be going in next for season 2. Although I will admit I've not been as worried as some other people have, because I have a lot of faith in Neil Gaiman's writing and was sure something good was going to happen. I just had no clue what that was going to be. But now we have a trailer, and an intro sequence, and suddenly I have so many ideas and thoughts and need to get them out somehow, so we're doing it. Firstly, the trailer, completely amazing. I've watched it an unreasonable number of times now and started quoting it like I quote everything else. It's deeply annoying to the people around me, but hey, I'm happy. From just the trailer alone, we get a pretty solid idea of where the story is starting, I think. Gabriel disappears from heaven and shows up on Aziraphale's doorstep, without his memories, which is implied but made clearer in the synopsis, and I think it's been mentioned in other places that there's an amnesiac angel, so I don't think it's explicitly in the trailer that he has no memories, but it's pretty clear. And Aziraphale and Crowley have to hide him from heaven, and also hell, and also work out what the hell happened to him with, it seems, the help of Uriel as one of the biggest side characters, going purely off the amount of screen time they already have in the trailer. The synopsis also mentions Crowley and Aziraphale trying to fix a human romance, presumably Maggie and Nina, as they're the only human characters we have so far, which is interesting given that neither of them gets more than like half a shot in the trailer. They have no lines so far. And so it's a whole element we wouldn't even really know about if we hadn't read the summary, which talks about it. Presumably, though, this situation has something to do with the Gabriel situation, and the question is really just, what does it have to do with it? An initial theory of mine was that perhaps Gabriel interfered with their romance somehow, or possibly even fell for one of them himself, and then split them up using a miracle of some kind, maybe wiping one of their memories, and it backfired on him as well. This is mostly going off the lovely little Gabriel quote about knowing everything would be better if he was just near one particular person, which is mostly getting attention in relation to Crowley and Aziraphale, which I'll definitely talk about later. But it's worth thinking about why Gabriel, of all people, would be the one saying something like that. It's probably much more likely, however, that some third party we're not familiar with yet has caused the disturbance that has affected Nina and Maggie, and also affected Gabriel separately, and we'll find out more about that as the plot progresses, because they talk about it as a mystery that's being unravelled. So there's clearly something at the end of the mystery, and if the thing at the end of the mystery is just Gabriel's an idiot, that feels like it's got less to discover than if there's something more. Whatever it is, though, I suspect that the romance is at the centre of it, because if you pause the trailer and read the article in Aziraphale's newspaper, you find out that the Buddy Holly song Every Day, that's playing in the background of all the trailers, has replaced all the records in a pub in Edinburgh somewhere. And also, somebody noted on my animatic I made for the Season 2 clip that we got at Comic-Con that the Buddy Holly song is also playing on Aziraphale's record player back there, so I suspect this effect is going to spread from that one pub in Edinburgh across the world. I suspect the song, and possibly the pub itself, has some sentimental meaning to Nina and or Maggie, and that's why that in particular is what's happening. Also, I believe one of them owns a record shop, so it's perfectly believable that they have a very specific music taste. I'm not saying that that song's not mainstream, it's just I'd never heard of it, because I think it's quite old, but I could be wrong. Some fun things I noticed in the trailer was that it looks like Uriel might be getting a bigger role in Season 2, purely going off the fact that they have significantly more lines than Michael, so I'm wondering if maybe they're going to be taking over from Gabriel while he's gone as kind of the new head angel. It would certainly be really cool to see more of them, because I really like the character, so I'm sort of hoping for that. We've also gotten our first look at the demon Shax, who is supposedly Crowley's replacement, and I find her very interesting. Not only because Crowley appears to be willingly talking to her, despite the fact that he's a traitor to hell, and Beelzebub told everyone to leave him well alone, but also because she seems to have come to warn him about what's happening. In other words, they're on good terms, and she feels like she owes it to him to go tell him that this is something that might be happening. So I'm wondering if they have some kind of history together, or if she has some kind of reputation for just not giving a damn about what Beelzebub thinks of her. She's also very classy, which is unusual for demons who are not Crowley, and I really want to learn more about her. The fact that Crowley has a replacement also makes me wonder if Aziraphale has one as well. It could be Muriel, perhaps, or maybe they were just on Earth to specifically check on the bookshelf that one time. Or is there a new character that we haven't seen yet, although that's probably less likely. Equally likely to Muriel being the replacement, though, is the idea that maybe Heaven just didn't bother to replace him, because frankly underestimating and belittling both humanity and Aziraphale's job in protecting them is a bit of a trademark for Heaven at this point, and it might explain why they sent an angel like Muriel to check on him, given that Muriel seems a touch naive and not particularly well informed, suggesting that they're kind of lower down the pecking order, and Heaven has basically deemed them disposable, which, how dare they, because I love Muriel already and would die for them and would adopt them. They're so cute. They are one of my new favourite characters. We've not even seen the show yet, but I love them. So the next big topic to cover, I suppose, is Gabriel. What is his actual role now that all his memories are gone, and will he be getting some kind of redemption arc? Is a question a lot of people have been asking. And my general thinking on the redemption arc point is no. Or at least not yet. The thing is, it's kind of hard to redeem a character when that character doesn't remember all the horrible stuff they've done. The odds are that Amnesiac Gabriel isn't going to get his memories back until the end of the season, and that when he does, the memory of his presumably nice time with Aziraphale and Crowley is going to conflict massively with his memories of his terrible personality, and trigger some kind of existential crisis for him, which I suspect we'll see get resolved in the hypothetical Season 3. Possibly with a last-minute change of side for him in that season, but I'm not even going to get on to predicting Season 3 yet when we've not got Season 2. Of course, there is a chance that he doesn't get his memories back at all, but in that case he's going to spend this season slowly starting to hear about some of the bad things he's done as time progresses, and once again in Season 3 we're going to have to see him deal with the consequences of that and have to decide what kind of person he truly wants to be, and whether he wants to be this new person he's become since he lost his memories, or whether he wants to go back to being head angel who hates everybody. With that version, though, where he doesn't regain his memories, I also think there's a pretty good chance of him running into some angels this season, and accidentally, or maybe even intentionally, betraying Aziraphale and Crowley to join Heaven, only to end up regretting it later when he realises that Heaven is terrible. It's actually a plotline that a lot of people thought might happen to Muriel, including me, although I didn't come up with it until somebody else had mentioned it to me. But from what I've seen so far, I think Muriel is going to be pretty quick to ditch Heaven in exchange for actual affection and support that they're likely to get from Aziraphale and Crowley, whereas Gabriel seems like a much more likely target to mistakenly choose Heaven because he doesn't remember what Heaven's like, whereas Muriel does presumably have 6,000 years of Heaven basically ignoring them to go off of. One thing I can't work out about the Gabriel plotline, though, is why Aziraphale and Crowley are so invested in keeping Gabriel safe from heaven and hell, at least before they notice things going wrong on Earth because of it. Because like I said, Gabriel is frankly a terrible person, and I think even Aziraphale's reaction would be to chuck him back up to heaven and let them deal with it, because it's not like he should be at risk from heaven, right? The fact they don't do this kind of implies that A, heaven has turned against Gabriel somehow, and it genuinely wouldn't be safe for him to go back there, and B, that whatever is going wrong on Earth has already gotten bad enough for them to notice by the time Gabriel shows up. Which, given that in season 1 it takes them 24 hours to go, maybe the reason this kid isn't the Antichrist is because they swapped the wrong baby, means that he might not show up till at least the end of episode 1, because I love Aziraphale and Crowley, but they're terrible at their jobs and they're not particularly quick on the uptake a lot of the time. I suppose, potentially, they could be keeping him just to mess with heaven and create a bit of a power vacuum or something to try destabilise it or whatever, but neither of those seem like strong enough reasons alone to call attention to themselves or to put up with an amnesiac who tried to murder them a couple of years ago, without more to go off. Speaking of idiots calling attention to themselves, though, Crowley and Muriel's little field trip into heaven is something I am so excited about. It's just such a fun idea. I love Crowley's silly little outfit. I drew it the minute it came out, and it has so much potential for causing trouble and also maybe introducing a few new angels, since obviously Michael knows what Crowley looks like, so he'd have to steer well clear of her. I think Uriel knows what he looks like as well. And I think an article I saw mentioned that there's a new angel named Sarakel. I don't know how to pronounce it, it's got a Q in it, as one of the new characters, so maybe that's where we'll meet them, and I just think it'd be really interesting to see what the kind of heaven underlings are like, because so far we've only really met angels near the top of the food chain. It'd be really interesting to see if all of heaven has that same attitude, or if actually once you break it down there are much more Aziraphale-type characters out there. Obviously not as good as Aziraphale, but more characters with a similar mindset to him that are just not close enough to the top to change anything. That little trip also makes me think about Aziraphale's summoning circle, which is back this season. Potentially they maybe use it to send Crowley up to heaven, since I assume he can't just, what with being a demon and all. Although I very much like the idea that they didn't ask Aziraphale's permission to go to heaven first, and so more likely I'm thinking is that they're using the circle to communicate with Muriel, like an interdimensional phone or something, to kind of keep track of their agent on the inside. Or possibly Aziraphale uses it to call hell. We've not seen him interact with many demons, excluding when he stood in for Crowley in the trial, and that could be a really fun idea with loads of potential. It has also just occurred to me as I'm writing this script that maybe they try use it to literally summon Gabriel into the bookshop to test that he's the real one or something. That could be super fun. It would also be a really dumb idea, because if he wasn't the real one, you did summon the real Gabriel into the bookshop. Like, that's gonna end so badly, but I think it could be really amusing and super fun idea. Speaking of hell, though, if we just backtrack a little, I also think it's much more likely that hell chucked the surrender the angle message through the bookshop window than heaven did, because it's much more their style, and Hasta definitely seems like the type to purposefully misspell things just to wind heaven up. I also think it's pretty safe to say that the war Aziraphale accidentally thinks he started is between heaven and hell, or possibly between the bookshop/humanity and heaven and hell, rather than any additional group that we haven't really come across yet. Back to the trailer though. I also noticed the very first scene opens with Crowley strolling into the bookshop and announcing he's back, and Aziraphale just kind of blinks at this and is like, I can see that. And whilst it's likely a scene that was just taken out of chronological order and put to the front of the trailer because like, hey, Good Omens is back for another season, the way it was set up immediately made me think about what if Crowley has actually been gone from London, and Aziraphale is still slightly grumpy with him about it, and that's why he barely blinks. We've been told that this season is set roughly in real time, so about 4 years after season 1. So that's 4 years of dead time that kind of needs filling somehow, like what's been going on since then. And somehow it just sort of clicked in my brain that what if Crowley and Aziraphale were going about their life and their relationship was developing, and then something happened, or someone moved too fast, and it spooked one of them and resulted in a spat or just a general kind of cold shoulder ignoring of each other, which led to Crowley taking an impromptu holiday without warning Aziraphale. It's not very likely, because it could just as easily be that Aziraphale barely reacts to Crowley because he's only been gone for like 5 minutes and is just being a drama queen. But it was a thought that I had, and I figured I should put it in here because if I'm right, that would be really cool. This is already longer than most of my script, and we're not even done yet. But the next big thing to talk about is obviously the flashbacks. We know a little about some of them, with 2 appearing in the trailer itself. So going chronologically, we've been told that this season is going to start right before the words, "Let there be light." Now, when we first heard this, everyone's immediately thoughts were Angel Crowley! And then we got the trailer, and everyone went, oh, okay, we've got this silly little Angel Crowley instead, kind of mock Angel Crowley. But I actually reckon we might still get both. The flashbacks tend to include both Aziraphale and Crowley, and I think the fact that we get silly Crowley later would make putting original Angel Crowley, like, you know, the beautiful long hair and fancy white robe and everything, even more impactful. And it'll also make the later version look kind of more ironic and funny in comparison, because we've seen what Crowley did look like when he was an angel, so in comparison, this version is clearly taking the mick. I don't think he's Raphael, though, because as cool as that would be, Neil Gaiman has replied to a comment about saying that he doesn't read fan theories, so that he doesn't feel restricted in what he can write about without copying people. And since he knows about the Raphael theory, because it was mentioned in said comment, I'm pretty sure he won't have done it. Plus, I feel like there's a nice little allegory thing of some kind in there about Crowley being a new person now, and therefore who he was before doesn't matter, and therefore his name from before doesn't matter, because that's not who he is, he's Crowley. There is also a chance, of course, that this scene instead might be a flashback with Gabriel that kind of explains how he became the complete asshat that he is. And that's probably equally likely, but I figured given that season 1 started with, you know, Aziraphale and Crowley in the garden, it would make sense for season 2 to start with, I don't know, Aziraphale and Crowley in heaven before the fall, that kind of thing. Next on the list, there's probably something set in the BC era somewhere, going off of the Tennant family photo we have, in which all 3 of them appear to be wearing robes of some description that vaguely remind me of Mesopotamia Crowley. The heads are cut off, so I can't actually tell based on the hairstyle whether or not it's closer to Mesopotamia or closer kind of like the 33 AD Crowley. My personal guess is that it might be something to do with Cain and Abel, given that in the episode intro we can see Adam's grave in the front, and we've been reassured that it's not Adam Young's grave. And since the whole murder idea only came to humanity since Aziraphale gave his sword away, this might be a really interesting thing to explore. Like, is Aziraphale technically secondhand responsible for the first ever murder? There could also be 100 other things that this scene is, because there's a lot of time to cover, like 4,000 of the 6,000 years, and we don't have a lot in there, so it could be anywhere, but it was just a thought. Then, of course, there are the 2 more significant ones that we know about. Firstly, the grave robbing in the 1800s. I'm pretty sure this one's going to be plotty. I suspect that given the show synopsis talks about Aziraphale and Crowley finding themselves in danger in both the past and the present, and it also seems like the angel statue that appears twice in the trailer is from this time, or that could be a trick of the editing. And given how long statues last, it could be both past and present. But in this scene, they're grave robbing, apparently, and I noticed that one of the gravestones in the trailer had the name Jane Austen on it. And I love Jane Austen. I'm a massive fan of Pride and Prejudice, and Emma, and I would love to see Aziraphale meet Jane Austen. However, my actual guess and theory for this is that it's set a little bit after her time, late 1800s, and it may actually be her grave that they're robbing. I also suspect that there's some sort of vault or catacombs involved in this entire scene, given that Crowley literally falls through the floor in the trailer, which I actually didn't notice the first few times I watched it, and then once I did I couldn't unsee it because it's really funny. He just kind of yells and like gets sucked into the ground. I suppose he could be going to hell, but it looks like the ground actually fell apart, so we're going to assume that there's a vault of some kind underneath him. I'm also trying to decide whether I think these backstory pieces and the idea of danger in the past is more of a subplot that mostly just has parallels the main plot and maybe, you know, gives them an idea that helps them find a clue later. Or whether it's actually part of the same mystery, and what happened in the past only makes sense in hindsight because the incidences were so isolated before in time, and now that they're close together they've noticed the pattern. If that is the case though, I wonder further what kind of being or entity is behind it, such that they both acted throughout all of time, and also set something in motion with the knowledge that it would be able to occur after Armageddon because they must have known Armageddon was going to fail. Because the only person who fits that category so far is God herself, and I'm not really expecting her to ever make a physical appearance in the series, although I suppose she could. The other backstory scene we have is, of course, the 1940s one, but I want you to just hold on 1 minute, because I'm going to come back to that, because first I want to talk about romance, and I figured I would start with the romance that Aziraphale and Crowley are trying to fix. Now, despite Neil Gaiman saying in an interview that the focus of the season was going to be quiet, gentle romance, we actually know very, very little about this aspect of the season. The trailer is mostly chaotic screaming and scheming and people being confused, and Nina and Maggie are barely even in it. In fact, we don't actually know for sure that they are the human romance mentioned in the summary. I'm just making that assumption off the fact that they're the only named human characters we have so far. Their actors have been at most of the panels, and so they must be some kind of significant part in the story. But as I said before, somehow their relationship is linked to the mystery of the greater plot. Unless Crowley's decided playing matchmaker as a side hobby is a good use of his time whilst Gabriel's chilling in the bookshop, but somehow I doubt it. I'm guessing that similar to season 1, we're going to be introduced to them and their situation first, and then maybe in episode 2 or 3, they're going to encounter our favourite angel-demon duo. Neil Gaiman's actually mentioned a scene in which there's a neighbourhood shopkeeper association, I can't remember if that's the technical name for it, but it was something like that, meeting of some kind, and since they both own shops on Aziraphale Street, I believe it's a flower shop and a record shop, so, flower shop lesbian and record shop lesbian, yes please. I suspect, though, that this meeting is where the encounter will happen. It's actually quite likely, I think, that Aziraphale already knows them through this, and only here realises that something's gone wrong, or potentially that Aziraphale has been skiving these meetings for years like he does, because he doesn't like interacting with human beings, and instead it's Crowley who meets them here. Because something else that wasn't in the trailer at all was the bar that is supposedly opposite the bookshop that we've seen from some of the set photos. The bar that everyone is pretty sure is Crowley's bar, and his new job now that he's retired from hell. So that could be one way that they get introduced. We don't actually know much about their personalities or relationship at all, though. Going off of their fashion choices alone, I suspect we've got a case of Grumpy One versus Sunshine One kind of dynamic, probably with some sort of twist, but that's all I can really gather because, like I said, we don't have any bits of conversation with them except for the short snippet at the beginning of the season 2 clip. What I do predict, though, is that Nina and Maggie are exes of some kind. The summary says that Aziraphale and Crowley are trying to fix a human romance, implying that something broke it, in other words, it already existed before the plot started. Now, whether that's Gabriel callously messing in human lives without considering the consequences of his actions, or some other force, I'm not sure, but them having previously been together, and probably intended to be together, might explain why them now being apart appears to be breaking the universe. Or I suppose potentially one of them is an ethereal being of some kind and accidentally broke the world with their desperate pining, but we've been told that they're both humans, so that's the assumption I'm working with. Whatever their deal is, though, and I would love to find out, I'm really excited to see what happens, see how their dynamic turns out, see how they contribute to the plot, because, like I said, this is the element we kind of know the least about. But finally, and this is going to be a ridiculously long video, so well done if you made it this far, we're going to talk about the big one. What about the ineffable husbands, and will they finally become canon? For starters, I think it's important to say that they are already canon to an extent. It is non-debatable that they care about each other more than anything in the world and are each other's most important person. If that's not the definition of love, I don't know what is. There have been interviews that people have pointed out that the apocalypse is averted because of their love for each other and their love for the world, and that's the whole point of the story. So obviously they care about each other. However, I also think we're going to get more this season for a number of reasons. One, Neil Gaiman is a very smart man. He described the season as quiet, gentle and romantic, and he knows this fandom. He knows the assumptions we're going to make from that, and he's not just going to sit back and laugh at us for getting our hopes up. Neil Gaiman's also really good at including queer characters of all kinds in the modern adaptations and TV adaptations of his work. The best example I can think of this is the Sandman comics and the Sandman TV show. It's subtle and really well integrated, and it still kind of maintains the characters and the personalities, but it's just really well done. There's also a specific Tumblr post I came across in which somebody asked why the show was becoming a romance given that the book wasn't one, and the response that Neil Gaiman gave to this was that Aziraphale and Crowley are the stars of the show, and they needed more plot time. I'm assuming this was in reference to season 2, but it wasn't quite clear from the context. What is pretty clear, though, I think, is that If making it a romance gives Aziraphale and Crowley more stuff to do, clearly some of the stuff they're doing is romantic. There's also a ton of evidence in the posters and the opening sequence. The heart-shaped clouds raining down in the opening, although arguably they could be representative of their interference with Nina and Maggie's romance. But that's not just it. They're crossed over in some way on every poster, literally on their own side, as someone on Instagram put it. And their wings make a heart. Like, it doesn't get much more obvious than that. Then there's the tiny clip of that 1940s backstory we have. Crowley is wearing the exact same outfit as he was in the Blitz scene in season 1, so I'm pretty certain it's set directly after that, after the whole lift home deal. And the two of them are having a literal candlelit dinner. It is so cute. Then there's Gabriel's quote over the top. Sometimes you don't know anything, but you're certain that everything will be better if you were just near one particular person. And not only is it gorgeous, but it also reminds me vividly of a scene from the end of Our Flag Means Death, in which Mary is describing what love feels like, whilst there's a montage of Steed and Ed's best moments playing over the top. They're really good parallels of each other, although probably not intentional. But it's the same kind of editing technique, and I don't think it could be more explicit about how these two feel about each other if it tried. So yes, I do think we're getting a proper Crowley and Aziraphale romance in season 2. However, I have seen a couple people on the internet tossing around this idea that unless they kiss, it doesn't count, and I have to completely disagree with that. Their relationship is built on centuries of friendship. It is so clearly an emotional relationship first and foremost, rather than like a physical one, and they both do strike me as slightly ace-coded. We've been told that angels and demons are genderless, sexless beings, and frankly I like the way their relationship is open to be interpreted as very queer platonic if that's what you want to see. That's not to say I'll be upset if they do kiss on the lips. I'm ace and I think kissing is cool, and it doesn't necessarily affect that queer platonic interpretation, or certainly not a romantic but ace interpretation. But I'm not going to throw a tantrum if we don't get that. I would like a hug though, and I'm pretty certain we should get that. I can also definitely see maybe a kiss on the cheek, specifically from Aziraphale. That seems like something he'd do. Or maybe even a kiss on the forehead could be quite likely. The big prediction I have, though, that I don't know if people will agree with me on, because I think people are scared to get their hopes up, is that I think it is exceedingly likely that we'll get at least one of them to say, I love you, before the end of the season. A, because I love you can be interpreted totally platonically. Perhaps we'll even get both of them to say it, hopefully, because it'd be really quite mean to leave us on a potentially endless cliffhanger with only one of them knowing how the other feels about them, but I'm almost certain we will get it at least one way before the end of the season, because they're allowed to admit they care about each other now, and I think that when the kind of danger that is coming for them pushes them to that point, one of them's going to break and just be like, I love you, which, super cute. As far as we know, of course, season 3 is not confirmed, so I'm hoping and praying that we don't get too many cliffhangers in case it doesn't happen, although I suppose it might already be confirmed, we just don't know about it. I'm not going to get into that, I don't understand how the industry works well enough. But either way, I'm super excited to see how it turns out, how all the mystery stuff comes together. I think the trailer's really good for not giving too much away. I'm still really excited to see what's going to happen, and I would love to hear your thoughts, so please comment them down below. I love to have people to talk about this too. And finally, I'm going to close the video out by mentioning a side note that's not particularly important, but when I first watched the new opening sequence for season 2, and the first 30 seconds was just entirely stuff on fire, my brain immediately went to that thing where Neil Gaiman said that all he wanted to do in season 2 was find more inventive ways to set Crowley on fire. And so despite having no evidence for it, Crowley on fire is going to be my final prediction for season 2. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I will see you soon.